Afternoon, everybody. Paula, Ebben here in the WBZ studio with our political analyst, John Keller. It's time for our favorite segment, What a Week.
Thank God it's Friday. Am I right?
This one, you are absolutely right.
Really?
This was a doozy.
Yeah.
And let's start with what was going on in Washington. The president's EPA candidate, Scott Pruitt, he had quite the hearing. And let's talk about what Scott Pruitt had to talk about.
Well, it is basically, it's a very complex litany of complaints about this guy. But the crux of it is that the only reason that EPA Chief Scott Pruitt has allegedly not stolen the sink out of the bathroom in his office is because it's bolted to the wall. That's the essential crux of it. He testified before a House committee hearing this week about a myriad of issues that have arisen about his use of taxpayer dollars. My favorite one is the spending of, I believe it was $65,000 to create a soundproof booth.
Like a skiff, they call it?
Well, remember the old sitcom Get Smart?
The cone?
The cone of silence, and then they could never hear each other inside the cone of silence. So he testified. Apparently he's on thin ice. That's the word out of Washington. And, of course, also this week, just parenthetically, the VA nominee.
Right. That did not work well.
Had to withdraw. So
there are so many questions there.
The cabinet follies continue down in Washington.
Cabinet follies. That's a good... We should have a graphic for that.
You like that?
Cabinet
Yeah,
follies.
kind of festive, kind of a Folie Bergère mood.
That's right. We can have theme music. Let's move on to what went on, a little bit of inside baseball in the House between Speaker Paul Ryan and the House chaplain, who is a Catholic Jesuit priest.
He's been there, Father Patrick Conroy, for the last 7 years. And you've seen the House chaplain, perhaps if you're a political junkie like me and you watch C-SPAN, perhaps you've seen, he'll open the House session with a prayer. And he also provides counseling to members of the House. Well, according to multiple news accounts, back in November, at the start of the debate over the Republican tax cut bill, Father Conroy opened up the House session with a prayer that addressed the question of the issue they were about to debate. Not an uncommon occurrence for him. Let's take a listen to a portion of what he said.
As legislation on taxes continues to be debated this week and next, may all members be mindful that the institutions and structures of our great nation guarantee the opportunities that have allowed some to achieve great success while others continue to struggle. May their efforts these days guarantee that there are not winners and losers under new tax laws, but benefits balanced and shared by all.
Mindful opportunities shared by all seem as though they are bipartisan thoughts.
Standard Jesuit boilerplate, if you will, no disrespect intended, but the kind of thing you would hear from the pulpit on a Sunday morning. But according to Father Conroy, later that day, House Speaker Paul Ryan, himself a Catholic, passed him in the hallway and said, "Hey, Padre, you really ought to stay away from the politics." Fast forward a few months later, he received a letter from Ryan saying, "I want your resignation as House chaplain," which he offered up, and he will be leaving at the end of the month. And many members of the House, Democrats and Republicans, Catholic and non-Catholic, are very upset about this. And one little other detail about all this, some members are also upset about comments made by some members of the Republican majority that they would really prefer to have a chaplain who could address some of the issues they might have with their wives or children. In other words, they'd like a chaplain with children. Of course, that would rule out celibate Catholic priests.
That would mean no Catholics. It would be interesting to hear what the president thinks about this, since on the campaign trail he talked about the rule implemented during the Johnson administration preventing religious leaders from commenting or being involved in politics, and he seemed to want to do away with that. Right?
Yeah, he did, but this just seems like a whole new level of pettiness.
Very, very interesting. Bringing it back home here to Massachusetts, Democrat Eddie Warren, the former mayor of Newton, was going to run for governor, trying to take down Governor Charlie Baker, the most popular governor in the country. And this week, said Warren had what to say?
He abruptly announced he was abandoning his campaign on the grounds that he couldn't raise enough money to make a legitimate run of it. Now, he has actually raised significantly more money than another candidate in the race, former Patrick administration budget chief Jay Gonzalez, also a Bob Massey, an activist from Somerville, is also in the race. But he abruptly pulled out, a lot of head scratching because he'd been running hard for, I would say, the better part of a year. It is true that he and the other Democratic candidates have raised paltry sums compared with some of their predecessors. I went back and looked it up. Again, I'm watching C-SPAN, I'm looking up stuff like this.
Your life is riveting,
You get an insight into how riveting my day is.
Fun.
I looked it up, and at this point in his successful 2006 run for governor, Deval Patrick had raised several $100,000.
Wow.
So, and Warren had something like 30,000.
Well, you know, when you look at those poll numbers for Charlie Baker, something like 70% approval rating, that seems like a big mountain to climb.
It's daunting, and you're going to need money, but you know what? When we do, no one knows who these candidates are now, but come September, after the primary, when there is a Democratic nominee, people will quickly learn who the Democratic nominee is. Money will come pouring in from the usual suspects, public employee unions, super PACs, and so forth. And Charlie Baker, while he's looking great in the polls right now, he's a Republican running in Massachusetts. He won over Martha Coakley 4 years ago by a wafer-thin margin, smallest margin in history. So it's curious because it just seems a little bit early to be pulling the plug on a candidacy like this.
Premature.
We wish him well.
Well, John Keller, what a week. We're glad you're here to break it down for us.
Thank God it's Friday.
Did
I say that already?
Have a good time.
All right.
Thanks, everybody. And for more of John's political analysis and WBZ News, just check out cbsboston.com.
Have a nice weekend.